Good day. I'm Dr. Tolosa, and today we'll talk about writing the research paper. At the end of this session, you, as the participant, are expected to be able to describe the usual format of an original research paper, recognize the main parts of a research paper and the appropriate content of each part, familiarize yourselves with reporting guidelines, and identify specific writing tips and how-tos. The first question you have to answer is this: what do you intend to write and publish? There are many different types of publications, and on this table you see three. There are review articles, there are perspective commentaries and opinion pieces, and there are what we call rapid communications. The columns on the right show the particular characteristics and the recommended word counts for these types in general. The one that's most relevant to you for this course are what we call original research papers. And this is the report, basically, of the research that you have done. So these are original full-length research papers which have not been published previously, except in a preliminary form as some sort of news article or research update. In general, we are advised not to let them exceed 7,500 words, including allowance for no more than 6 tables and illustrations. And these are written in what we call the IMRAD format, which we will see the details of in a little while. Now that you know what you're going to write, the next question is, where do you intend to publish? Much as the requirements of this course only include the final written manuscript and the presentation of the paper in the annual research forum in November, it's always good to look beyond that and find ways to disseminate the findings of your research. Now, dissemination can be one or both of two ways. You present in conferences or conventions or fora, or you publish. So for some people, it comes as second nature that when they do research, they automatically think of where they intend to publish. And we know that in various levels, across various levels of the medical profession, whether you are a student or a clinical trainee, mastering some specialty, or already a consultant, research publication is a common and popular indicator of professional growth and success. It would then be helpful if you knew the answer to this question. What general standards do journal editors and reviewers uphold when they evaluate a manuscript? So let's look at the list. This list includes many of the usual things that editors and reviewers would look for, but this may not be exhaustive or all-inclusive. But let's take a look. Editors will usually see or check how well you comply with their instructions to authors. That section where you have to do, reading of all the fine print, it's truly a test of how well you would understand guidelines and instructions. So it would pay to review those instructions to authors in whatever journal you intend to submit. And then the adherence to the manuscript requirements as recommended by the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, or the ICMJE. They have a website that you can visit to look at the requirements for authors. And then looking into the study itself, these are the things that need to be addressed or evident in the paper. What's the significance of the study to the target scientific community? Is there novelty or originality of the paper? Adequacy of the title and abstract? Is it demonstrated the study's methodologic and statistical rigor and validity? How well did you do your discussion, conclusions, and interpretation? Are they sound and do they convey value? And then, of course, the general writing style, the length, and the organization of the paper. This is the format of a manuscript, particularly the original research article. You have a title, you have an abstract that is usually structured, and then you have IMRAD. IMRAD stands for Introduction, Materials and Methods, Results, and Discussion. And after that, you have the references and then your acknowledgements. Here is the basic structure and the expected contents of your original research article. You write an introduction where you explain why you did the study, and in there you subsume the objectives. You don't have a separate section for the objectives the way that you did in the proposal. In the methods, you say or narrate how you did the study. In the results, you state what you found out. And in the discussion, you explain and elaborate on the implications of the findings and the interpretation in the context of other literature that came before. In references, you get the most relevant and the most recent, about 20 to 35 would suffice. In acknowledgments, you mention the people you'd like to give thanks to, those who do not qualify as authors of the study. And then, of course, you have the section for tables and figures. So we're done with the introductory portion of the lecture, and it's time for our first pop quiz. Because it is the first part of the manuscript, the title must be written first. True or false? Let's try to answer that with these two citations. Like every well-written story, a scientific manuscript should have a beginning, the introduction, middle, meaning the materials and methods, and an end, the results. The discussion, representing the moral of the story, puts the study in perspective. The abstract is an opening summary of the story, and the title gives the story a name. So it's all right to write the story first and then try to find a good name for it, so that writing is not necessarily in the temporal order of the final document, not in the sequence of how you wrote the IMRAD. The title is considered the most important part of the article. It is first contact, and so it is the part that's most often read. On its own, it must be able to stand and catch attention. It's also a determinant for the indexing process of the article, which in turn contributes largely to the visibility of the paper. Your title should reflect the essence of the article, and it must be brief, direct, easy to understand, specific, and jargon-free. A good exercise would be to list the most important words associated with your research, the variables, processes, outcomes, interventions, experimental conditions as relevant. Then arrange the terms in logical order and connect the terms with phrases, conjunctions, or transition. And because it is easier to first write everything that you need to write and then look or make an appropriate title than to write a title and pattern everything after it, then you must write the title last. Now moving on, let's have my second question. The abstract does not have to follow the IMRAD format. True or false? We are now talking about the abstract, which in a sense is a form of a clincher, because it presents the deciding point for the reader. Does he read the whole article or not? So that abstract should present to him a concise summary of the manuscript with no written references, and it must be easy to understand, it must be informative, and yet not too detailed. The abstract should succeed in providing a brief overview of the current knowledge on the issue, summarizing the methods of the study, and indicating its major findings. It may have statements showing the major implications of the paper, but this must be consistent with the study conclusions. The number of words in a structured abstract should be less than 250, and structured abstracts are usually the way to go now. But for those who still write unstructured abstracts, the word count recommendation is less than 150. In the past, abstracts and research articles for that matter were written in the past tense and in the passive voice. But do note that these days there are many abstracts or papers already written in the first person active voice. So in the past you may have read papers that went like, the researchers conducted the study in so and so hospital. But in the first person active voice, that would sound like, our research team conducted this study in so and so hospital. The abstract also should be self-contained and should be able to stand alone without the reader's need to consult the full text. And it should not include references to literature or to figures or tables in the body of the paper. When writing the abstract and the keywords, remember to include only information that is present in the paper. Abbreviations or acronyms that you use for the first time should be spelled out the first time it appears in the paper or in the abstract, unless these are really standard or very well known. Now about the keywords, each abstract should have about 3 to 10 keywords, and these are usually placed below it. The purpose for these keywords is to assist indexers when they do cross-indexing of the articles. And you use terms from the mesh list of PubMed in order to facilitate indexing and retrieval. What element does the full article have that is not present in the abstract? Yes, you're right. The abstract does not have a discussion section. Therefore, it's not written in IMRAD. It's actually IMRAC, which is just my, made up term. So from results in the abstract, it's the conclusion that follows. Let's go now to the introduction. In some places, you might see this being written as background, but they would essentially mean the same thing. The introduction should aim to present the topic to the readers in a straightforward way, keeping it short and focused. The suggested length is about 3 paragraphs. For the first paragraph, mention the questions or issues that outline the background of the study. Here you establish context, relevance, or nature of the problem. The second is the importance of the problem, what is known, and better yet, what is not known about it. And in the third, you state the rationale, the hypothesis, main objective, or purpose of the study. The data or conclusions from the study should not be presented here. They should not preempt what will appear in the later or the latter sections of the research paper. So writing the introduction at the end may actually have some merit because it becomes clearer and better to summarize when you've already written the methods, the results, and the discussion sections. Let's go now to the methodology. The aim of this section is to give the reader all the necessary details to replicate the study. It's often said that when you give sufficient detail, a person doing or reproducing your same experiment should get the same results as you did. Now, when you write the method section, one good way of checking if you have everything in there or if all the details are complete would be to check your work against the reporting guidelines that are appropriate for your study design. And if you go to equatornetwork.org, you will find these acronyms: Consort, STARD, STROBE, PRISMA. These are statements, and basically they are guidelines on how to report studies depending on design. So they have checklists usually. For example, if you're doing a randomized controlled trial, you use the consort statement. If diagnostic or diagnosis, you use STARD. STROBE is for observational studies, and PRISMA is for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Now, under methodology, you be sure to write the essential elements of your study. So, present the study design, identify the measurement parameters that you used, define and describe the variables as they are relevant in the study. Explain thoroughly what you did by way of the study design, sample selection, the inclusion and exclusion criteria, the data collection method, the data instruments that you used, what analysis statistically and the data analysis, and then of course the ethical considerations. Write your pre-specified primary and secondary outcomes and all the other relevant variables. You must also describe the statistical tests you used, especially those that are not very common. You may need to explain them further. Are you ready for my third question? The method section can just be copy-pasted as is from the protocol. True or false? Let's answer that during our open forum.